Now, it's been a while since I've taken this ship out. And after the somewhat beleaguered attempt to get the. Is beleaguered really the right word? Oh, well. The horrendous attempt to get the Reclaimer out of Lorville, and that was using 3.4 dot whatever flight mechanics. I decided during a org event to try the Caterpillar. And the Caterpillar, surprisingly, it transitioned right into vertical flight. Vertical flight, horizontal flight, and it just lifted up right out of Lorville. It wasn't fast, and of course this is an unloaded Caterpillar. It's an unladen Caterpillar. So I was able to get up at a fair angle, and I was able to get up out of the atmosphere. It took a little while, but it took significantly less effort than it took to even get the Reclaimer halfway up through the atmosphere. So I'm going to be very interested to see how this ship performs in the new flight engine. But as I said, we're having an org event. It was the usual shenanigans around Jumptown, and I decided, you know what? I hadn't done a Gambler episode in a long ass time. Why not go to Jumptown, load up on the Allura toxin or whatever, the cheaper of the drugs, and just spend all my money, gamble it all on one run, and see how that works out for an episode. What could possibly go wrong? Now, I have to be honest that in my idealization, in my point of view, and this is obviously not something that's going to apply to everybody, but this is generally what I feel a laden with normal cargo Caterpillar flying out of Lorville should be, fully loaded with normal cargo, not like lead or uranium or something that is really, really heavy and dense, but a normal cargo load, like consumer goods, whatever. Just not consumer goods made of lead. This is kind of how I idealize flying out of the atmosphere. This is how I kind of idealize how it should be. Getting up out, it's not that easy. It's not very fast. It's time consuming, but at the same time, it's a much more enjoyable flight experience. And I think that I want to test it some more before I really kind of make a pronouncement about it and say that like this is bad or this is good. Because once again, we have to have it in our hands and we have to try it out before we can say either way. But I feel that almost like they're going for a too restrictive model. And so we're going to have to come back and correct the other way a little bit. But once again, on that RTV where they were discussing these changes and they were talking about big ships taking off from planets, they did say before that they were willing to make changes, that this isn't something that's set in stone and this is the way it's going to be, so deal with it. They're just kind of exploring, I guess, the different ends of the spectrum to see where kind of the player tolerances are, and then they're probably going to zero in on a happy medium, right? Now, if someone were to say to me, hey, I think you should be able to pitch a ship at 90 degrees as soon as you leave the flight dock and go straight up at maximum afterburn. No. I think everyone would agree that's a little bit unrealistic and kind of stupid looking. I think that in general, in 3-4, we were almost in a good place. A little bit restrictive with the bigger ships, but once again, we know my feelings on the bigger ships, but I think that we were almost there. We were very, very close. Now, I want to see it once again, but I feel that we're kind of heading towards an overcorrection. Now, beyond all of that, of course, there is just the idea of operating a ship like this in Star Citizen in its current state. Because, as you know, if you're flying a fighter, then your fighter gets blown up, you can quickly get it back, you can get back into action. But when you try to move into bigger ships like this, getting it back without having to pay a premium takes quite some time, and investing in any components or any modifications for this type of ship is extremely expensive and very risky, because right now, if you lose them, they're gone. So there's not a lot of, upside to operating a ship like this. And at any point during this operation, of course, I could spend all my money on whatever illicit substances, transport them to Levski. At any point, I could be disconnected from the server and it's all lost. It's all gone, right? And so that's not really an environment that's all that conducive to exploring the, different types of gameplay. Right now, a lot of people complain about, it's all griefing and everyone's blowing each other up and I just want to play the game. But the problem is that even if you were to take all that griefing out, there really isn't all that much to play with, because at any point you can just get wiped out with no recourse. And there's probably the reason why a lot of those people are out blowing each other up is because there isn't much potential for reward in any other type of gameplay other than just going out and blowing things up and having fun. Oftentimes you'll see players on Spectrum characterizing the current state of gameplay as being overrun with like these psychopathic griefers, and the truth is I think that that's actually a symptom of the current state of the game. It's, players will go and do things that they find the most reward out of, and certainly, flying around in a big ship like this and all of a sudden getting wiped out through no fault of your own or even another player isn't very rewarding gameplay. But going out and blowing things up, that's kind of rewarding, that's kind of fun, that's kind of interesting, that's something to do. And so players will more and more gravitate towards that type of gameplay rather than investing time into ships that, truthfully, just one error can totally wipe them out. And so any kind of progression that you may be experiencing and any kind of fun that you may be having might just be stolen away from you. Whereas, if you take a stock Cutlass or you take a stock Super Hornet out and you just blow things up, if you get disconnected, whoopee-doo, big deal. Go get your ship back in like 3 minutes and you're back in it and you're doing it all over again. Whereas something like this obviously is a much bigger time commitment, and the rewards are very long ways off in terms of replacing large components for a ship like this, and you may not really get there. In fact, you're almost guaranteed to not get there, because at some point the server's going to disconnect and that's going to get all wiped out. Now, on the upside, there are certain things that you can pick up from the current state of Star Citizen. There are certain lessons that you can learn from it. Now, if I were a pilot flying all by myself, obviously this would be a recipe for disaster. This would be, basically tempting fate in the extreme. Flying down to Jumptown all alone in a ship like this with no one manning the guns, just me in this ship all by myself. Not a real big brain move. But when the location has already been secured by friendlies, it becomes a lot more interesting. It becomes a lot more fun. It opens up possibilities. It opens up opportunities for myself. And I think that that's something that, in a weird way, a lot of MMOs have kind of, what's the word I want to use? They've kind of degenerated into largely single player experiences with certain multiplayer facets, where in the old days, way back when, you used to have to basically group up with a number of players to even achieve some of the most basic things. There's a lot of MMOs you can look back from the good old days that kind of featured that type of gameplay, but in the end, a lot of them kind of reverted back to a more everybody can do everything, so everyone can go out and solo things on their own, and it's only this super high-end content that you really need a group for. And it kind of destroyed the social fabric of those games, and it did so in a very negative way. I think that it diluted the experience, and it kind of ruined the experience in favor of too much player convenience. And there we go, we're spending all of our money. Oh man, what a huge risk. But then again, really, no, it isn't. So I mean, we're gonna get it all back in March anyways, at the end of March, so whatever. But back to what I was saying, I think it kind of it ruined the sense of community. It ruined the shared experience in favor of player convenience. And I think ultimately, though there are many arguments that you could make that this makes it a lot easier for the person on the go to get in and play the game and whatnot, I think it wasn't immediately obvious what was lost, but the sense of community, the sense of teamwork in the current state of a lot of those games is so far gone and so destroyed that it really has kind of ruined those games. And I would argue that that's probably one of the major contributors to the reason why a lot of MMOs have experienced a lot of subscriber loss. And they're really out there struggling, trying to find new ways to attract subscribers, whether it's skins, whether it's all this different stuff. But they keep kind of circling around this thing where it's like, we actually kind of have to make the game a little bit more difficult. We have to make it a little bit more challenging and make people rely a little bit more on teamwork to get things done. That ends up making it the much more reliable experience, or the much more entertaining and engaging and immersive experience. There's a lot of aspects in Star Citizen that I think we can agree are problematic and are going to have to be discussed at length. There's a lot of issues to discuss, but the general PvP situation, I don't think is one of them. I think that it is one of the aspects of the game that is headed in the right direction. Certainly right now, if you look at what happens around Jumptown, there's a certain amount of give and take. There's a fight for Jumptown. And then once, let's say the Space Justice Warriors come in and they kick all the pirates out of Jumptown. They say Jumptown's open for business. Everyone can fly in and load up and make money. And people come in and they do, and they make their money real quick, and then the pirates come back and they push them out, and then they start making money. And that give and take, that creates gameplay, that creates an interesting environment where players come into conflict, and it kind of makes the game feel much more alive. Whereas if it was all just a bunch of NPCs, it wouldn't be really all that exciting. I think that taking that away in order to kind of create a much more convenient or predictable experience, I think ultimately would not be beneficial to Star Citizen. I think that would go completely in the opposite direction, and it would cause Star Citizen to just degenerate, as so many other MMOs have, into just hours and hours of mindless grinding while knowing that you're more or less perfectly safe, because generally where the NPCs are, how they behave, they're predictable, whereas players are unpredictable. And I think that that's what makes the universe interesting. And I think relying on other players isn't always a negative thing. Maybe you can be the super smart guy who builds a transport that's very stealthy, and you can get in and out of Jumptown while everyone else is fighting and no one sees it, and you earn those rewards. Good, then you earn those rewards for being smart. But at the same time, if you get together with an org and you say, you guys are going to take Jumptown, I'm going to get a whole load of drugs in and out of there, and they agree to that and you work together as a team, I think that is an equally rewarding experience. And I think, given the choice, for me personally, between doing this all by myself or doing this as a part of an organized team, I would always choose doing it over an organized team over, just trying to do it myself, even though I would like to explore some of the options of possibly getting it done myself, because that could be pretty exciting as well. But all in all, I generally prefer the team-oriented activities a heck of a lot more than the solo activities. Often, people ask me, then why are you still playing BFA? And I say, well, in general, largely the game sucks, but the raiding content is amazing, and I'm having a great time. And if it wasn't for the fact that I was on raiding with a very organized and very successful and skillful group, then I probably would have quit months ago. So yes, there are many issues in the game that we can discuss where the developers have, maybe gone in the wrong direction and maybe a course correction needs to be taken. There's a lot of room for discussion, and obviously there's going to be a lot of time in the future to have that discussion before the game is at a point where it's considered, an actual game. But I don't think that PvP is one of those things. I don't think that going out there and asking for PvE servers or, kind of asking the developers to kind of punish players who engage in PvP is really heading down a productive path. I think that overall PvP is in a good space for the current state of the game, and I think it's going to evolve in a very interesting way, and I want to see how it's going to evolve, and maybe the players who are demanding that it be changed or removed should maybe take a step back and look at the game objectively and realize what they bought themselves into, and maybe think that the problem isn't the game. Maybe the problem is how they're approaching it. Anyways, that's the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.